Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Stephen Carter. I'm the Editorial Director at IGB. Today, we're delighted to be hosting a webinar with Cloudflare on scaling the security and performance of your games. Our moderator today is David Lallement, who is Account Director, Gaming Sector for Cloudflare. He'll be giving a short presentation and hosting a fireside chat with Betway's Kevin Cadman and Oscar Mamazinski. I'll hand over to David to provide you with a bit more detail and do the full intros very shortly. Before I do that, I just want to tell everyone there'll be a Q&A section following the presentation. So please do submit questions as we go along, and we'll try to address as many of them as possible in the allocated time frame. With that, I will hand over to David. Over to you, David.
Thank you so much, Stephen. And thank you, everyone, for your time. I'm David Lallement. I'm an account executive for the gaming sector here at Cloudflare. And my role is to help clients grow their online presence. I'm joined by Kevin Cadman and Oscar Mamazinski, who both lead the DevOps team here at Betway. The Betway group is a global leader in the online betting and sports betting and casino industry, and their games are enjoyed by 2.5 million user active monthly. We are going to have a fireside chat and discuss in the second part of the webinar how Betway is leveraging Cloudflare to help their organization grow, to also discuss some of their scaling issues and efforts and achievements, and as Betway is currently enjoying a rapid and global expansion. So I'm going to actually, before we do this discussion with Betway, we're going to set the scene and present a couple of things on how Cloudflare help gaming companies scale their online presence. I'm going to shut down my video to be able to present and make sure that I preserve the internet connection here. So let me do that. And we are going to set the scene by reviewing some scaling challenges we deal with our gaming clients. So I'll share, let me see, up. I'll make sure that the slides are moving. Okay, cool. Before we do the conversation with Betway, I'll share a few tips and a few suggestions on how Cloudflare support the growth of our online clients and their computer needs while they focus on delivering an excellent gaming experience for their players. All right. So to start, let's see why and what we need to do to scale a game and what scaling is helping to solve. Game operators want to create games that appeal to many people, which are popular in many countries, and they want to keep their players engaged. And sometimes as a game becomes viral, all of the scaling efforts are mainly about keeping up with players' demand and the heavy loads on the application. So why is scaling important? Because creators of the games, just like the players, they want their game fast, fluid, available 24/7, and secure and have privacy focus for the players. So scaling depends on your architecture. The way you scale depends on the architecture and also where you need to meet the demand. Here, this is a very simplified architecture diagram of a game. This can be a mobile or a desktop application. It connects to your front-end and back-end infrastructure that will host the game servers, the API, your storage, your data and analytics stacks, etc., etc. And that infrastructure resides either on-premise or in a public cloud, or sometimes a mix of both. As the number of players grows, you will need to increase the computing power of your game and reinforce the strength of your backend infrastructure. So leaving the database aside for a moment, we will be looking at more server resources to compute increasing workloads, store data, and deliver the content. And nowadays, most game developers deploy their application in public clouds because they auto-scale and they provide ways to adjust server capacity based on real-time changes in player demand. And that makes scaling way easier than deploying physical hardware and network connectivity, and also fronting the cost and the expenditure for it. As your audience become global, and because your network connectivity does not beat the speed of light, you will be forced to deploy your infrastructure closer to the players. And this is especially true if your application requires a single-digit milliseconds latencies, like in real-time gaming. And this is one of the reasons public cloud offer to deploy your game on different regions, or what they call availability zones. So for sectors such as online gambling or online national lotteries, having your data physically stored in a local infrastructure is a requirement for compliance or for data residency requirements. Another way to scale is to use different clouds. So you may decide to work with more than one cloud provider, specializing either in a certain region or offering different storage, data, or computing need. And selecting the perfect cloud partner is hard, as the popularity of your game grows differently around the globe, and you need to align the reliability with the platform cost and the optimum user experience. But at Cloudflare, we're really noticing more and more web application workload balance, load balance between different clouds, and it is a very interesting trend to witness. So to make your backend and your front-end infrastructure go further, we can look at a couple of things to optimize, and the ones that are related to how Cloudflare can help. So the first thing is you can always write better code to help reduce the number of read and writes on your application. You can optimize the database load and monitor everything as much as possible to manage resources and to do proper capacity planning. You can tune how often the server updates the game state or use as few external scripts as possible. You can work on the size of your files and how many times they are distributing and how often they're distributing. You can look at the page load time. You can always try to be moving your application logic, your assets closer to the users. And you can be looking at sizing the server and making sure that the traffic is well distributed among them. And also you can keep the bad traffic out of the application and out of the infrastructure. And there is so much more. I mean, large gaming companies with hundreds of IT personnel work on so many, on so much more scaling topics and scaling issues. So there's an expression that says, when you scale, do not count servers, but make the servers count. And this is where Cloudflare comes in to help. We will be sitting between your infrastructure and the players, and we will make them feel like your backend has been multiplied worldwide. And in some way, this is a bit of what will happen. We've built an extensive Anycast network. It acts as a giant reverse proxy for your web properties, and people use it to accelerate their web application and keep them secure. It is a global network in 3 important ways, and this is why it's a fair choice for many fast-growing gaming companies. So I'll explain quickly the 3 ways why it's a bit of a different network than what we have. So first of all, it is a global presence. It has more than 232 cities in over 100 countries. The applications that use the network are going to be automatically advertised in every single city. We do not have a concept of region or zones unless you have data residency requirements, but this is a premium service rather than the default setup. And 3, each machine in each location will operate every available Cloudflare service. We do not have a network for scrubbing or a network for caching or POPs dedicated to do compute at the edge. So it's a very highly integrated service. And so, for example, this integration of service will help you scale the performance and the security of your application in many ways. So looking at performance, the way we help you scale is, first, you're going to be advertised globally. You can be caching your content closer to the users, running the code at the edge. You can load balance between your servers, or do things such as adapting the image resolution, minifying files, using broader HTTP caching, and correlating a lot of data about your application performance. So let's look at a couple of services in details. So caching. Caching is one of the most used techniques to help you scale and improve the speed of your application. It makes you scale globally in an instant. And if your application is heavy with static assets, it can really reduce your infrastructure need by up to 80 or 90% sometimes. The second part would be about load balancing. A load balancer is a software or hardware device that keeps any one server from becoming overloaded. Cloudflare load balancing is software-based and infrastructure agnostic. It means that you can use it to distribute the traffic among individual servers and between clouds and data centers. It uses global server load balancing, GSLB, to distribute the traffic to a healthy server pool dynamically. It can be a faster server, a region, or any logical steering rules you define, no matter where they are located in the world. And load balancing is a good piece of the puzzle to make your server count and provide an optimal game experience. It's very important to scaling. You can also think about going serverless. Today, people are moving from virtualized environment to containers that are running on top of a VM. And the reason is that containers emulate just the operating system and make for higher utilization of the hardware. They're easy to start and kill, and therefore it's a great choice for fast scaling. And at Cloudflare, we run a similar computing platform called Workers. Workers is based on a super lightweight technology that was developed by the Google Chrome team called V8 Isolate. And that sits as well on our 200 points of presence. So every code that you're going to be running will be at our edge. So you can deploy it actually with a CLI, a command interface, or our API, or just our web interface. And it means that your code is globally deployed in minutes and run within milliseconds of your user worldwide. And because we are handling your request at our edge, your server don't have to. So it's saving you a lot of infrastructure and headaches. It also comes with edge storage that is built in. So you can store your static assets at the edge with Worker KV, or key value store. It's our low latency key value data store. And it is optimized for these high read applications, such as validating user requests to your API, or things like dynamically localizing web pages. If you need consistency at the edge or real-time coordination between multiple clients, the Worker platforms come as well with a durable object storage layer. It seamlessly interfaces with WebSockets connection and opens a large door to start implementing real-time interactive application that can communicate over persistent data connection. And all of this is on top of Worker. So if there is a developer that wants to run their next big hit, let's say a real-time multiplayer game using nothing but their application and Workers without any server or traditional infrastructure, now it is possible. And we've built an example with Silent Space Marine. So if you go to silentspacemarine.com, you can see the game. It's a Doom multiplayer game running on top of our Workers platform, and it is accompanied by a blog that explains a bit of the technical behind the scene. I wanted to show as well a diagram of the Workers platform. We believe that giving developers tools to configure and deploy things automatically, use automation and production-ready services is an important aspect of helping them scale fast and more safely, and also help them stay ahead of the competition. Automation is one topic that is in everybody's mind at the moment. So in order to scale properly, you can also prioritize security. Each time you create a connected app, your company is exposed to a software layer attack on the web. The hardware layer is also open to vulnerabilities. And here I'm just showing a couple of small examples of attacks that game developers and gamers face. And funnily enough, is often the gamers are the bad actors themselves. One of our clients who experienced this during a time of explosive growth is Discord. Discord is a voice and text communication application for online computer gamers. And since they are a gamer-focused product, they attract many users who love to DDoS each other during game matches. And unfortunately, as they grew more and more popular, the intensity and the occurrence of the DDoS attacks increased to the point where the engineers were constantly battling them. And before Cloudflare, they were using many HA proxy boxes with DNS load balancing to fail over during the DDoS attack on their real-time gateways. However, this initial hardware solution cost Discord hundreds of thousands of dollars annually, and it was a lot of engineering time to maintain the boxes. So they called Cloudflare, and today Cloudflare sits in front of their WebSocket servers to absorb layer 7 attacks and various layer 3 and 4 reflection attacks. And this is where having a cloud-based security provider that can protect you at different layer and different parts of your application is key to scaling. Because if you can keep out all of those bad requests from wasting your resources or even taking them down, you will save a lot of money and ensure you're ready for a global domination. So the last tip that I have is that if you still manage an IP range for your network or a data center, as this is often the case with established game operators or in the gambling sector where the regulator is asking them to keep some sort of on-premise infrastructure, you can leverage your entire network to defend against the largest, most sophisticated attack. And this product is called Magic Transit. So we make your on-premise network ready for worldwide success. The main reason is that it is cloud-based. The majority of solutions today for layer 3 DDoS mitigation are either within the ISP or it's a hardware box that is deployed on-premise. And so with ISP, unless their core offering is focused on DDoS mitigation or provide you with a dedicated service for DDoS mitigation, you may end up sharing the DDoS solution with other subnets, and you may not have a great quality of service. But on the other side, with on-premise boxes, client may install just a few gigs of mitigation capacity to keep the cost down, and often it may not be enough to fight very large attack. So with Cloudflare, we are arming you with 60 terabytes of DDoS mitigation. The DDoS mitigation and also the BGP announcement is at our 200+ location. And since we are very well connected with tier 1 and tier 2 ISP, it actually does improve the performance and the reliability of the connection. And one client who noticed it was CCP Games. They run a massive MMO games called EVE Online. And since switching to Cloudflare for layer 3 protection, their player noticed an improvement in the performance and reliability of their game, especially in Australia, where some of the players had to purchase a VPN solution to be able to connect to CCP's data center to be able to have a good online experience. And now with Cloudflare, there is report that a lot of those players in Australia do not need to use their VPN anymore. So using a cloud-based layer 3 DDoS mitigation was my last advice for today. So with this, I wanted to go into the most exciting part of this webinar, which is my the Fireside Chat with Kevin Cadnam and Oscar from the DevOps teams at Betway. And I think that I will move back my camera. Hello, Kevin.
Hi.
And we're gonna wait for Oscar as well to join.
Hello, hello.
Thank you so much for being with us. So we're going to speak about Betway and scaling and how you leverage Cloudflare. So thank you so much for being here. Maybe what we could start is present you yourself, your roles, and a bit about Betway and your audience on the internet. How about we start with that?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Kevin Cadman. I head up DevOps at Betway, along with another department called Operational Analytics. We are obviously part of the Betway group, and we are a online sportsbook and gaming operator. We operate in several countries around the world, and yeah, as you mentioned, we have a customer base numbering in the millions. So obviously with this comes some serious challenges, and we've been on a process of evolving our offering over several years. We have been through previous providers who we've attempted to establish these sort of protections with, and our recent iteration has been towards Cloudflare, which has been an overwhelming success. So DevOps in Betway isn't necessarily just confined to the standard traditional CI/CD approach. We do include end-to-end Cloudflare setup, monitoring, and ultimately our department strives to be the approvers of work rather than the doers of work. This is obviously has to be based on two things, which is a you build it, you own it mentality with the dev teams, as well as everything being centered around infrastructure as code. So we have repos for everything. We open our repos to the departments, we let people contribute to them, and we obviously manage this with pull requests and automated pipelines. So we've got a great bunch of engineers working across the board. We have a very hybrid setup in terms of our hosting, and we've got some smart people helping us along the way. And one of them is our DevOps architect, Oscar. So I'll let him introduce himself.
Thanks, Kevin. So I work as a DevOps architect along with some other DevOps engineers for Betway Group. And as Kevin mentioned, our team looks after the edge solution through Cloudflare, and as you also mentioned, that we do strive for automation of that solution, and then also trying to help out other engineers in other parts of the business as well, who are also looking to adopt Cloudflare. And our team is then also responsible for looking at features around security and performance, anything that we can do to improve those aspects of our business, and then also monitoring of our sites. This being the availability of the sites as well as performance, usually monitored through the core Web Vitals metrics.
Okay, cool. So you've been with Cloudflare for about a year. Okay. Before we go into this, I just wanted to So Betway is growing fast. It's entering many markets in different countries for your sports book and your casinos online. When you speak about scaling, there's a couple of changes. What are the big, how do you think about scaling and the big topics around scaling? And it may not be only just server counts, but what are the...
Yeah, so when most people think of scaling, they think of, well, first of all, infrastructure, right? Is that you know, do we have enough servers to handle the load? Are load balancers configured properly, and things like that? And for the most part, we've not had that many problems with scaling of the infrastructure. There were some hiccups every now and again, but we're able to handle those things through moving quite a lot of things to the edge, a lot of processing to the edge. As you mentioned, for example, Workers being one of the products. So we utilize Workers on the edge quite extensively. But in terms of the unexpected challenge that we had, was actually the amount of changes that we have to make to the platform all the time. So you know, business comes to us with maybe some problems to solve around maybe performance, or maybe we would like to solve some problems around bad bots, bad traffic hitting our sites, or we would like to implement some improvements to SEO or redirects or anything like this, or changes to routing and traffic as well, with and DNS changes, anything like that. So because the Cloudflare platform is so all-inclusive, there are changes being made to it all the time. And we found that our team, if we had to do all those changes, then our team would not be able to keep up with the pace. So as Kevin said, what we had to do is basically delegate this ability to make changes to the platform to various engineers, to developers, sometimes even to business people. And we have done that through infrastructure as code with Terraform. We've allowed people to make changes to our code repositories, which then get reviewed. We might have potentially a discussion over what actually is changing, whether or not it's in the right change windows. And then it gets approved and automatically deployed. So we had to quickly adopt to changes, and also at scale, because we don't just have one website, we have multiple websites that we host through Cloudflare. And if we wanted to make blanket changes, for example, to some of the performance improvements that we've put in, or things like that, we just had to deploy them at scale. So doing it manually or doing it just ourselves would just not be possible.
Okay, very good, very good.
I think one thing to add there, in terms of scaling, you know, often it's the technical challenges of scaling come first and foremost, but you really have to think about organizational scaling as well. When you have a product like Cloudflare and you do implement something like infrastructure as code, you've got to be so careful that you don't end up with a situation of key man reliance, where one person knows the system and that's the go-to person and they have to do everything. But by embracing, you know, everything through infrastructure as code and automation, and opening it up and being as transparent as possible, realistically anybody can go and learn exactly what it is and how to make a change. And if they make a mistake, the pull request will be returned. And that is actually a very important consideration as well, is how do you scale internally from a resourcing perspective, as well as from your actual technical, your hardware.
So organization is a key consideration there, and the people. There's a people aspect. Okay, cool. So when it comes to security, how do you plan or think a bit about scaling? And maybe we can speak about before and after Cloudflare.
Yeah, so at least in terms of security, we do have certain requirements in the first place, right? That we need to. So we have a need for having a WAF for our websites, for DDoS protection, some kind of protection against credential stuffing attacks, which before Cloudflare used to be quite a nuisance. We spent a lot of time trying to basically plug up holes where we saw potential attacks, trying to figure out patterns to this, and block them on a sort of ad hoc basis. And then DDoS attacks as well, as you said. If we had DDoS mitigation, then it would be hosted on-prem, for example, and then it might not be adequate to handle every DDoS attack that gets thrown at us. So now with Cloudflare, we utilize the bot management features of the firewall. So we have the requests scored from 1 to 100, or sorry, from 1 to 99, where scores of less than 15, in our case, are quite likely to be automated actors. So not necessarily bad, but we try to filter out the bots that are valid, like crawlers, search engines, things like that, and automation tests. And then we try to issue capture challenges towards certain scores. So this dramatically reduced, well, first of all, the time that it took us to mitigate these attacks. We've seen a massive drop in credential stuffing attacks as well as DDoS attacks, to the point where we no longer even need to report, we don't need to have someone on call go in and check out the DDoS attack, because it has no impact at all on our downstream services. The other thing is that when it comes to planning on iterating this, we look at challenge solve rates. So potentially if there are false positives being served or challenges being served to customers, we want to make sure that as few customers are being impacted by this as possible, that we only challenge bad traffic. And then we constantly try to refine these rules. So we would look at request logging, firewall logs that come out of the platform. We would look for certain patterns. We would check that obviously all of our associated businesses as well can access our website. And we just try to iterate on that.
Cool. Being able to prevent the bots before they are even being reported, are like coming from a proactive stance into, from a reactive into a proactive stance is has a lot of benefits, I'm guessing.
Yeah. So for example, we noticed on our origin servers, I believe a 10 to 15% reduction in bandwidth after enabling bot management, just because of all the bad traffic that we never really wanted in the first place, and that's allowed us to then use that in other ways.
Yeah, and that's the what we said, that keeping the bad traffic out helps you scale in that way, and that was the one of the topic in the slide. So you're a Microsoft Azure client, okay? They also have the similar services inside the cloud, and as an architecture point of view, you would be thinking about, like, should I do this inside the cloud? Should I do this on premise? Should I do it on top with Cloudflare? How were you thinking about this at the time, and what would you say to someone? Well, I could do it either on premise, or I could do it, I could do the same of Cloudflare but inside AWS or Azure or GCP.
Yeah, so when we were picking Cloudflare last year, we did a bit of a vendor evaluation, with some of the alternatives, some of them being cloud native as well. And it just happened to be that the criteria that we had basically didn't match. So there were certain features that were missing, especially around how we wanted to route requests to specific origin servers, and then also around how automatable the platform is. It was something that was very high up on our list, that everything has to be automated in some way, or at least reachable through an API that we can automate, and that just wasn't there. But in terms of some of the, even if somebody was trying to do that using certain set of products, either on-prem or through the cloud, or try to do something on their own, it really comes down to the question of time preference, right? So what does your team want to actually work on? What do you want to spend your time on? Would you rather, spend time building a bespoke solution, which might be very apt to your business, or would you rather let the experts handle the traffic, and then maybe spend your time providing value to the business? Because one thing that we've noticed is that we're not experts in performance and security and all the different options that Cloudflare provides you. We realized that almost post fact that, oh yeah, this was a good feature to enable. We didn't know what sort of performance impact that would have, and then once we enabled this, then we were able to spend some of our time on something else, basically. Much like we've mentioned with bot management, is that with bot management, that we no longer had to spend our time worrying about credential stuffing attacks. Then we could worry, for example, about the core web vitals instead, and have a look at performance improvements that the Cloudflare platform provides instead.
I think something to add there is it also boils down to what tools you have in your arsenal. And it's one thing, we obviously did extensive vendor analysis and selected Cloudflare because of the points that Oscar mentioned. But in a world without that specific edge provider, what do you have in your arsenal if you ever come under attack from a perspective of any sort of DDoS, if you don't have that, or if your DDoS provider is not necessarily providing you the flexibility to do what you need to do. Before Cloudflare, it was quite difficult because our rules to stop any sort of attack had to be very specific. And we had to basically say, we want to stop this user agent from this country. But then they could just pivot to another country. So it was this constant cat and mouse. Now, what Cloudflare does is there are two aspects to it. There's the intended benefit and the unintended benefit of Cloudflare. The intended benefit being obviously what you are moving to Cloudflare for and what you gain out of your vendor analysis. In terms of the unintended benefits, Cloudflare becomes your Swiss Army knife, not just to solve security problems, but to solve actual business problems. We might get into elaborating on some of those a bit later. But personally, for me, that has been something which has been amazing to see, is that it allows us to think in a different way of how we start solving problems at the edge, rather than having to always rely on something in a limited number of tools that we have available to us.
Do you actually want to elaborate on the unintended benefits?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's quite. I'll give an example, and then Oscar can too if he has one. But I'm obviously in a more business-facing role, and I'm constantly exposed to business problems. Some of them have a security context, like earlier around trying to manage bad bots and automation on quite a sophisticated scale. But when we start connecting what can be what we know as a business and what we can do with Cloudflare, it becomes quite powerful. As an example, if we have traders who know that we don't necessarily want to lock an account, but we want to rate limit that account, we start thinking now from the perspective of, can we push some sort of user identifier into a KV store, which a worker can then interrogate and make decisions at the edge in terms of what to do with that traffic. Now, that was never possible before, and we're still very much in the spitballing ideas phase, but it's allowing us to close that loop in terms of what is technically possible and what the business has an appetite for and what they would love to be able to do. So yeah, it is definitely a Swiss Army knife in terms of what we can now achieve from a mitigation and security perspective.
We've also had some interesting unintended or surprising results, let's just say, out of the use of the platform. For example, we thought that if you're talking about performance improvements, just enabling HTTP2 on the sites when we moved from the origin server serving on HTTP 1.1 to HTTP2 on Cloudflare is massively improved the performance for mobile phone users, just because lowering the number of TCP connections that I have to make to the edge. And it's something that we didn't even consider at the time, and it's actually the developers who came to us saying that look at this, actually it's probably been one of the better features to enable, that it was just a tick box, you just enable it and it's done. Similarly with I think with image resizing, it has some complicated image resizing logic, which is actually part of the Cloudflare's edge solution for image caching and also for processing of images, which then allowed us to reduce the average size of images by about 50%. And our site is quite image heavy, so it is fairly important. And then obviously we want to resize them for the correct device type as well. So some of these things we didn't even consider until we started using the platform. Like the use cases just keep generating themselves really once you have that solution.
Yeah, and I remember when all you're talking about now is about performance and load time, etc. And I remember that when you came to me, you came for a security solution for your web assets, which is funny.
Yeah,
it's always a bit the same. Yeah, it's always yeah. A lot of people come to me for performance, and they're like, "How's your CDN?" And they're like, "It's great. I've been able to patch a lot of security problems." And the other way around, when I say, "How's your security?" It's like super fast. My application is really fast, so which is great.
But
cool.
I think that you touch on an important point there, and that is, whilst it might first and foremost be a security solution, it's very, very important that as a company embracing Cloudflare, you don't just embrace it as a security solution, because the real power, in my opinion, comes when you embrace it as a proper edge network, and you start thinking and you start challenging your developers in terms of their application delivery. How can we utilize edge compute? How can we utilize KV stores and image resizing and polish and rocket loader and auto minify and all these features that allow us to optimize our code and our delivery of that. Now, before, if you think about how that has shifted now to be an edge problem rather than a origin problem, where beforehand, those are all traditional developer problems that need to be solved. And whilst Cloudflare isn't necessarily a magic bullet, which is suddenly going to solve all your optimization and bad code problems, it's certainly going to give the best version of whatever you've got. And that only comes with embracing Cloudflare as a platform rather than a security solution. And what we found is that some people might tend to view it as something you stick in the edge and then you just carry on with your merry way, or even try and have a situation where you have a high availability outside of Cloudflare. But that solution is just not going to scale. Like, you're not going to do a better job at high availability than the experts at it. And that comes down to Oscar's point earlier in terms of time. If that is not time well spent, where trusting Cloudflare with your time is the wiser solution.
Nice. Cool. I wanted to give the audience, let's say that we have people that are enjoying a viral game here, okay, and they're scaling and growing fast and meeting a lot of players' demand. What would you give them as tips when it comes to scaling? And it could be, I don't know, resources to keep an eye on. It could be process or people centric. What would you give to this audience for as tips for scaling or things to be keeping an eye on?
Yeah, so if we are just starting out with a project, especially on Cloudflare, then first of all, infrastructure as code for everything. If you can manage it to start on this automation journey. If you can push as much work to do to the edge as possible, then you don't even need origin servers to scale in the first place. And we've done that with Cloudflare Workers, where just as an example, in February, when we moved to Cloudflare, I think we started with 1 billion requests, if I remember correctly, a month. And now we're up to 11 billion requests. And most of that is on Workers, and that scaled just fine with zero extra configuration. It just handled the load with absolutely no problems whatsoever. If your games or your site is image heavy, then definitely utilizing the caching and the custom CAN rules and image resizing as well is very beneficial. Especially the polish feature as well for image optimization, which I mentioned, then lowered our images average size by about up to 50%. If you utilize cloud services, then spreading out origin servers close to the customer still makes sense. So it obviously is beneficial to have the points of presence in the Cloudflare network to be as close to the customer as possible, but then you also might want to have the origin servers quite close to customers, especially if they so maybe not for assets, because assets would be heavily cached on the edge. So I'm talking about static pages, things like that. But for API calls or any dynamic content, anything like this, it's probably better to have it closer to the customer. Then trying to lower the load on the origin servers by eliminating the bad bot traffic. If you can use bot management or the custom firewall rules, that will definitely reduce your bandwidth, reduce a load on the server. And then using all the other security and performance features of Cloudflare. So, TLS, the 1.3 TLS, HTTP2 I mentioned. The fact that we get cert rotation for free as well was a massive benefit procedurally for us, because previously we had to rotate these certificates absolutely everywhere, and it was a nightmare. Things that we haven't even considered before, and we just enabled it, and it helped us. It was Berkeley compression as well on the edge. So all these different features that you can just tick off as a flag on Cloudflare, and you can instantly see the benefits, the improvements. And then lastly, once you've got that set up, then you want to monitor your systems, right? So you want to make sure that you're monitoring your firewall rules, what they're doing. You want to monitor your challenge solve rates if you have challenge rules or bot management rules. You want to monitor your core web vitals, which are also scanned by Cloudflare through what's it called, the real user measurement, I think. Yeah. So monitoring that and then feeding that back through through that loop to try to improve constantly. I think those be the main tips I'll give.
Okay, and did you want to add anything? Maybe people, processes, or?
Yeah, ultimately, the first thing I think of is ensure that as much compute as possible is at the edge, because once again, you don't want scaling to be your problem. And if it's at the edge, as Oscar mentions, it's not your problem. And obviously, everything is shifting that way in terms of compute, and it's just way more efficient. Obviously, what we mentioned earlier in terms of infrastructure as code is an absolute must. You cannot absolutely not embrace this sort of setup without having some sort of repository where everybody can contribute and everybody can see what's going on. But ultimately, it also comes down to what I mentioned earlier: is Cloudflare will present the best version of your product, but you've got to also ensure that your product is in a decent state. And yeah, you may have a bunch of APIs behind the scenes, but you've got to be ensuring that you're on top of your metrics and understanding your core metrics across the board really becomes important. Another consideration which is actually important in any situation is understanding that you're introducing a variable or an unknown to a business. And if I look at our scenario, we have country managers who look after regions, and they are responsible for acquisitions. So similarly, if you have any sort of acquisition arm to your business and you're introducing an unknown, you've got to make sure that anybody responsible for that acquisition understands the element you're introducing, and you give them complete visibility of what it is doing. Because the last thing you want to do is be blamed for a drop in acquisition rate because you're now being a little bit too confident with your bot rates. So one way we actually solved that was we embedded JavaScript in the capture page to actually post an event in the background to record the session ID of the person who is retrieving the capture. And that not only allows us to monitor capture solve rates, but monitor rates of active players who have a session who are being captured. And in that regard, it basically is used as a way to appease and pacify the acquisition arm to ensure that we are okay, or that they are okay with what we've introduced to their systems. So yeah, I'd say don't forget about the business is another key aspect of it.
Okay. I'm wondering if there is any any questions from the audience yet. There is no questions for the moment. Do you want to share a bit of what is next in your Cloudflare journey? If this is something you want to divulge?
Yeah. So the next feature that I'll be looking at in Cloudflare. So two features really are waiting rooms and rate limiting. So starting with rate limiting is the feature that would then allow us to stop some of the abuse of our APIs, where people are actually able to scrape certain things off our websites, and that also contributes quite heavily to the load on the origin servers. And then potentially also is then open to certain attacks, like people trying to use the login endpoints or the login page to use it for credential stuffing attacks. And not all of them can be detected through bot management. So that's another way in which we can do that. And then waiting rooms, which is a feature I think only came out as GA fairly recently, would then allow us to manage load to our content pages and our sites in case there is overwhelming load, let's just say, right? So if we have all of a sudden we have a sporting event that has thousands of customers clamoring at the door, and they're all trying to do a certain action or trying to access a certain page, this might put too much load on our origin servers for that particular amount of time. So we're thinking potentially we can put people into a waiting room, and then they can wait, for example, for 2 or 3 minutes while they're in the queue. Then the load on the origin server smooths out a bit, and hopefully gets a better customer experience rather than taking the site down, for example.
Cool. Yeah, it's a fairly new product. We invented it we created it, sorry, for to help vaccine booking websites during the COVID time, where a lot of those websites didn't have the infrastructure to support the load. And I'm very glad this product is moving to other use cases that are mainly event-based. So like a sports event, concert, etc., where there's a need for booking, and sometimes you need to wait a little bit or make the user wait a little bit for the server to be able to accept that much request. So it's I'm glad to see it being used for different use cases. Cool. I don't think there is other questions from the audience. So, and we are almost on top of the hour, so I think we will leave it at that. Kevin and Oscar, I want to thank you so much for your trust, for your business. I wish you a lot of success. You're growing very fast, so I'm excited to be a small partner of yours. And thank you so much for your time and your trust.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you, David.
Yeah.
You're certainly enjoying the journey.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Sorry to cut you there, guys. Yeah, thank you, David, Kevin, and Oscar, for your time today. That was a really great discussion. Thank you. As David said, we've all got time for today. So thank you all again, guys. Today's webinar has been recorded and we're available to listen on demand shortly on igamingbusiness.com for you to rewatch and share with your colleagues. Otherwise, we'll see you very soon. Thank you very much. Have a good afternoon.
Bye-bye.
Have a nice one.